Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Chewy. How are you, love?
Hello. I'll let you know that I'm fueled and hydrated for day 2 of Sean Plunket.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know. It's still going, isn't it? And there's more to come. We are going to be talking about Plunket tonight, and there's two aspects of this. We won't get into too much of it right now because we've got Anna Brooks coming up in about 10, 12, 15 minutes, and we want to do some stuff around with the dogs. What the politics of the COVID thing are first, and then Anna's going to join us and talk about the medical side of things. But on some level, you got to say credit where credit's due for the apology. On another level, you got to say the 2 minutes after the apology with 3 snidey comments takes a bit away from the apology. Funnily enough, the 2 minutes after that didn't get put up with the apology, but I've got the audio to play you. It's like me saying, Chewy, look, I'm so sorry. So sorry I said that thing about you. It was nasty. And then a minute later going, you fucking arsehole. It's not quite as bad as that, but it's a bit like apology is an apology. And then it's, and then there's just snip, snip, snide, snide, snip, snide.
It's that classic one, isn't it? Hey, look, I reacted really badly and out of character, and you definitely didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't have fucked me off in the first place.
Or the classic one is, I'm sorry for how you felt about it. That sort of thing. So look, I mean, look, let's be honest. He offered an apology, but the reason I've said in our thing, his apology was maybe more of an apology, is because straight after the apology, it's like snidey comment, snidey comment, snidey comment. That to me kind of felt like it undermined the apology and turned it into an apology. So he probably ticked the boxes that he had to tick, that he felt he needed to tick, but we'll have a look at that a bit later on the show. What we're going to look at right now is a big thank you to all our patrons. Lovely to have you on board. If you want to be a part of what we do, we would love to have you on board with what we do. Just head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News, patreon.com/Big Hairy News to be a part of our Patreon family. If you become one of our patrons, you immediately become 22% more attractive, and you become 22% less likely to turn out to become a Sean Plunket. That's the other thing as well.
That's science. That's just science. Like one of the best pieces of evidence for that is Sean Plunket is not on our patrons list, and he's still Sean Plunket. He could do something about that, but he won't.
He could become less Sean Plunket. So, look, chat, get up into it. I want to hear your thoughts. If you've got a question for Dr. Anna, ask Dr. Anna. She's with us live, so we're happy to take some questions and comments around that. I really wanted to have a talk to her about 2 things, which we'll get to. We're going to look at the isolation decision that's been made, but also about how COVID is at the moment. I don't know about you, Cho, but I think I know 6 people right now with COVID. Like I know, and I know that a friend of mine's child has just come home from a camp or a weekend away or something with COVID. So that whole group will have it. It feels like there's a bit of a wave at the moment. I don't know if there is or if there isn't because everyone stopped reporting. So we'll have a bit of a chat about that as well and see what the situation is. So, and also in general where we're at and what's going on with the whole COVID thing. Have you found that? Because people are saying still the flu thing. It's like the flu. How much of it? I don't think I've ever known 6 people personally, like firsthand, like not just like a friend of a friend, but like who have had the flu at the same time. Do you know what I mean? It's just
I mean, I had quite a bad dose of cold/flu a couple of weeks back.
Yep.
And it definitely wasn't COVID, but pre-COVID. Generally, I shrugged off colds and flus pretty easily, but this one hit me reasonably hard to the point where I was like, oh no, we got the COVID again.
Got the COVID.
I'm still masking up on buses. I share my buses to work with school kids and that sort of thing. I just figure, if it's a standing room only bus, why take the risk?
Yep.
But but yeah, still doing it,
Yeah.
still around.
Yep. No, I'm not masking when I'm out in public. I'm not masking at the supermarket anymore. And I think the antibodies that I've still got from having it in December are still around, which I think is evidence that my 14-year-old didn't give it to me. But when I go to Auckland in May, I've booked a flight up to Auckland, I'll be masking in the plane. No
I am
question.
booked in for the new booster.
Are you the one that's
I'm
got
getting-
the bivalent, the bivalent,
bivalent,
the
that one.
bivalent? That's like the
So-
big the big 70s car version of it, the bivalent. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Two Valiants worth of vaccine, please. No, I saw someone mention it on Twitter, and I was like, oh, well, I'll go have a look at the website, and it was just like, oh, cool, I can do that and book my just normal flu shot at the same visit.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just do that then. So yeah, after work tomorrow.
Nice,
Easy.
bro. I don't think I can. I think it says you got to have not had a vaccine or COVID within 6 months. I think that's part of the criteria. So it means I'm December, so I'm not available for it. Oh, I guess till May. I guess May's 6 months, isn't it? But we'll see.
I'm on that pre-order release, son. I
Nice,
get the
bro.
Limited edition.
Early access.
It's got I don't know, glitter in it or something.
All right. Well, this is a part of our conversation around COVID tonight. This is actually out yesterday morning. We had a certain douchebaggery fill up our time yesterday that we didn't get to this. But we're going to play a little bit of this. This is the conversation that was going on before the announcement was made that we were staying with the 7-day isolation rule. Now, the reason I wanted to play this was for to allow kind of Christopher Hipkins to explain. He didn't say it's going to stay because it was pre-press conference, but if it does stay mandatory, the 7-day isolation, there's a reason for that. So let's have a look at the conversation off the AM show from yesterday morning.
Cabinet will make decisions on that today. It's always a finely balanced set of decisions. So we have to, on the isolation period, we've got to weigh up a number of things. We've got to weigh up the potential impact on case numbers. But we also do weigh up the impact on employment and on the labour market.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges here is if you have to isolate, then obviously you can't go to work. That has a labour market implication. But on the other hand, if you go to work with COVID-19 and you give it to a whole lot of other people, that can also have a labour market implication. So if we think, I was Minister of Education last winter, and we had a number of instances where schools saw a spread of COVID-19 through their classrooms. A whole lot of teachers ended up getting it, having to take time off work. And in some cases, schools struggled to stay open during that time, which meant parents ended up having to take more time off to look after their kids. So these are all the kind of things that we've got to weigh up and make sure we're getting the balance right here.
So people can still...
So again, once again, this is before the decision was made, but the conversation that he's putting out there is it's not just about getting back to business, because if you go back to business too soon, and Chewy's got a story to tell about this, and you infect more people, then that's worse for business. But now we go into the conversation, I think, about, why can't we just, she didn't say this, but this is what the opposition is saying, why can't we just trust people? Why do we have to make it mandatory? Melissa doesn't say this, but that's the themes.
Still isolate, right, if they have it, and without it having to be a mandatory period? Or are you saying that actually, unless there is a mandatory period in law, people won't do it and we won't trust them to do that?
Yes, that's what we're saying.
Well, we can have recommendations. We have recommendations at the moment. If you get the flu, then we recommend that you stay home. A lot of people don't, and as a result, a lot more people get the flu than would need to if everybody stayed home when they had the flu. So we have to accept that if we remove the mandatory restrictions, more people will go to work with COVID-19 and more people will get it. So those are, we get some modelling on that gives us an indication of what the effect might be. We'll work our way through that, and then this afternoon we'll have a bit more to say about that.
But currently, do you believe that COVID needs to be treated differently to the flu?
Yes.
And that, as you say, there is no mandatory period for the flu, but COVID there needs to be?
So this is a ridiculous question. What she's actually asking is she's not asking this, but the reality of her question is COVID and the flu the same? Because if we're going to treat them the same, they should be the same, and we know they're not. So, and we're going to get to some of those facts and figures shortly. So ridiculous question, but she's asked twice now, should it stay mandatory?
It's still one of the major pressures on our health system. Whilst I know a lot of people now have moved on from worrying about the global pandemic on a day-to-day basis, the health system still deals with the reality of it on a day-to-day basis. It's one of the major causes of people being admitted to hospital, one of the major causes of pressure on the health system. So we do still have to factor that in. And of course, we've got to factor in the fact that there are still vulnerable people out there who, if they get COVID-19, the results for them are going to be different for the results that the majority of us might experience.
Now, the other thing, and they haven't changed it, so we don't have to actually think about it today, but if it then also wasn't law for the 7 days isolation, what does that mean for people and sick days and you know, telling their bosses, I can't come in, I've got COVID, and the boss is putting pressure on? We're going to hopefully get to Easter trading laws today as well. And a lot of this comes down to this whole idea of shouldn't we just trust people, or aren't people worthwhile of trusting? And the answer, and sorry to be a bit of a Debbie Downer, is no. People are shitbags. People will do what they want when they want, and they won't think of other people. You know, if there was no speed limit, do you think everyone would drive around at 50? You know, it's a ridiculous way to think about it and to look at the world, that we can just trust people to do these things. Because, I mean, I wish we could, but I think the evidence is fairly clear that we can't.
Oh, you bring up speed limits. Like, does everyone stick to the speed limit? No, you can't trust people. You had to legislate it. You had to go, this is the limit, and if you go past it, you get, you know, there's consequences, to coin a phrase. But yeah, I think the main concern is if you remove that mandatory stay home if you got COVID, then the first thing that happens is people don't get paid for staying at home.
Yeah, so that's
they have to go to work.
Yeah,
you know, there's pressure from their workplace. Then they're going into their workplaces. They're infecting their customers, their colleagues, all of that sort of stuff, and then it spirals. And as I keep banging my head against the wall, you look at the daily chart. Well, it's not even daily these days anymore, but on the Ministry of Health website, we've still got an enormous amount of daily infections.
And it's going up.
You cannot trust someone.
And the results we're seeing aren't necessarily the accurate results, as we know, because people are underreporting or not reporting at all. But the reality is, as a worker, especially the vulnerable workers, people on minimum wage, that sort of thing, they are the ones that will face the most pressure from their bosses to come in and work. And whilst there's a legality around this, that they don't have to be at work if they're sick, we all know that if this is an entry-level job, if this is a minimum wage job that doesn't necessarily need a skill set to have, and anyone can do it, then it's like, oh, so you don't want to work public holidays for me? Oh, okay. Yeah, you've got a review coming up in 3 months. Well, that's fine. You don't have to by law, but you know what I mean? It's ugly. So anyway, let's also have a look at, this is actually again from last night, a little clip from News Hub as to what the opposition had to say about how we should cancel the isolation, the 7-day isolation.
The opposition says mandatory isolation should have gone yonks ago, as it has in many other countries.
I think we're at the place where we can take strong guidance, but I'm not sure we need mandatory isolation periods.
This government's been treating adults like children for far too long.
The government has asked for specific advice on test to work,
What
so
a
if
twat.
people test negative, they can leave isolation early.
There is a labour market incentive for this as well. People with COVID-19 going to work potentially infect more people, and more people end up being off work sick as well.
Modelling released today showed ending isolation periods could result in an up to 25% increase in the number of hospitalisations.
Okay, I just want to pause here. Right, so what Seymour and Luxon are actively saying, because if they want to get rid of isolations, what they're saying is the isolation laws are not as valid as 13 to 25% more hospitalisations and death. We're happy to have 13 to 25% of more people either be hospitalised and die if we don't have to isolate for 7 days. So here's your choice. Isolate for 7 days and save 13 to 25% of people going into hospital or dying, or leave whenever you want and have more New Zealanders in hospital, more pressure on the health system, and more people dying. And they choosing, let's leave early. Let's leave early. I've got 2 seconds. Let me just see if there's anything else, because there's 2 seconds to go. This might be the end of it.
Deaths over the next 6 months.
No, that is it. So that's over the next 6 months. Yeah, sorry, you go, Chewie. I was just going to check.
We've already compromised on isolation. Remember, it was 2 weeks, and then they're like, "Oh, we can drop it back," and that was against what the advice was. I remember we had Anna Brooks on, and she was like, "You're still infectious at day 7."
This is one of the questions we want to ask. So, if you're within that 7-day period, I'm assuming, look, I'm okay with this concept of it's a 7-day isolation or until you test negative. As long as on day 6, if I'm negative, that means I'm not infectious. If that's the case, sure. So I don't actually know the law right now, so forgive me for being a moron, but if what it's saying it's 7-day isolation no matter what, I mean, I've heard of kids who can get rid of it in 5 days. You know, my 14-year-old, we think was asymptomatic, and we think she probably had it for a couple of days before she tested. Her 7 days might actually mean 10 days because she wasn't tested yet. So is it when they test negative, or is it the 7-day? Do we do the 7-day anyway, even if they're testing negative? That's a part of the conversation. But to just cancel isolation, that's basically saying, and Chewy will tell us a story shortly, that anyone turns up on day 3 of their isolation into a shop and infects a bunch of people. Let's just quickly do this last story before we head off to Anna, who's just joined us and is in the green room. This was on RNZ this morning. Christopher Luxon only spent a week in isolation with COVID-19 because it was mandatory.
What a prick.
So he only did it because it was mandatory. National Party leader Christopher Luxon said he would have physically gone back to work earlier than 7 days after testing positive for COVID-19 if it was not mandatory to isolate. Luxon caught COVID-19 a second time in March, saying it was 2 or 3 days of really, heavy flu. But then I was rat testing each day. The last 3 days I was negative, and I was quite capable of coming to work and so, I just think we need to move on. Now, there's 2 things. When you test negative, can you leave? But the second one is if you cancel isolation, that means Christopher Luxon or anyone could have not isolated at all if they had chosen to. So we do need to double check on that. I was quite capable of going back to work, and we need workers back in the workforce. He's trying to consider himself as a fucking worker. Good one, board member. You're going to say, Chewy?
Do you remember what he looked like after he got COVID?
He was all puffy.
Dude looked like he was dying.
Yeah.
Like he looked like death warmed up, and how he's going, day 3, I was fine. I was out bloody chopping wood and wrestling wildlife and stuff.
But we need workers back, Chewy. We need workers back to serve our groceries and stuff. And that's why he wanted to go back to work, because supermarket workers needed to go back. So Luxon needed to go back to work, whatever the fuck that means. Anyway, you see a larger increase in this is some of the experts, right? You see a larger increase in those hospitalizations and death than the increase in transmission in the short term. Co-lead of the study, Dr. Emily Harvey, told Morning Report on Wednesday, assuming New Zealanders follow the advice, this is the numbers I wanted to put out, following the advice to isolate, even if it's not mandatory, and the increase in transmission is only boosted by 5%, the modelling suggests it would result in 25% boost in hospital admissions and 15% more deaths in the following 7 weeks. The central estimate, 10% more transmissions would see 55% more hospital admissions and 34% more deaths, while a 15% transmission could end in 90% more people in hospital and 56% more deaths. And that was assuming no change to the virulence or of transmissibility of the virus, nor seasonal effects, for example, becoming easier to spread in winter. Last part of this article, we won't go to that, but we might come back to that at the end, because we'll go have a chat with Anna, because this is also talking about what the experts say. So the experts are kind of all saying, yes, please, right? So I'll paraphrase that by saying the experts are all saying, thank the good Lord we're keeping the 7 days. And then it goes on to say this, the article, but the opposition wants mandatory isolation gone. We don't have that hero complex of going to work sick. That's what we've learned through COVID, Luxon told Morning Report. So I think we need to trust the New Zealand people, give them strong guidance. We don't need mandatory isolation periods. The one good thing from this, Chewy, is I now assume that Christopher Luxon is pro-cannabis, because we just need to trust the New Zealand people, give them some strong guidance, and we don't need to have cannabis off the table. Do you think, because if we're going to trust the people, this is the thing, yeah? If we're going to just trust the people to make the good decisions, why are we stopping at isolation? What about everything
I've heard
else?
Good things about meth. Look, I tell you what, this is my first reaction. I tweeted this out as soon as I heard about it, right?
Yep.
This shows Luxon and Seymour have a fundamental lack of understanding of what the isolation is for. They are only thinking of it from their own position, not anybody else. Like, I don't care if you feel fine. All the scientists, or everybody that's studying this thing, all the virologists and that sort of thing say it doesn't matter if you feel fine, you're still infectious. That was certainly my experience when it hit me. 3 days felt terrible. felt really, really bad. After that, feeling fine, still testing positive every day.
Yeah.
Hey, so I could have gone down to the shop and had a great
Let's
time.
get Anna on now, because this is one of the points I do want to clarify with Anna. So from the University of Auckland, Dr. Anna Brooks joins us. Anna, welcome back to the show. It's been so long.
It has.
Hi, Anna.
Hi.
Hey, first question, and I think it's a bit of a silly question, but if, like you hear about younger kids and stuff kind of testing negative quite quickly, if someone was to test negative on day 4, 5, or 6, are they therefore not infectious, and could they be out of isolation?
Yeah.
Okay. So is that a middle ground, that the 7-day isolation, or when you're testing negative, that could be the new rule?
Yeah, well, it was that comment that we sort of made quite a long time ago about testing to exit, right? Because that goes both ways. If you have a long infectious period, you're not out there infecting people. And if you're done and dusted quickly, you can get back to business. And that's why we always wanted to implement this. I get the reasons why they don't want that. And that's, well, I think the term is to avoid confusion. But if the term is test to exit, then I'm not sure why that is deemed confusing. Yeah. But, as in you could say, I mean, even the whole, it should be 7 days at least and then test to exit, it's still, that can be unnecessary. But I think one of the things that mandates do in a protection way, it's also protecting the individual that is sick, miserable, and at home, and their employer might be trying to make them go back to work, where A, they're sick and miserable, but B, they don't want the conscience of going and spreading this, and they're getting the pressure from their workplace to return to work. So I think in the context of mandating isolating when you're sick, that's where the wider protection comes in. So it's taking that onus off the individual, because honestly, no one should be going into any workplace coughing and spluttering, but we know that happens. Yeah. So we know at the very least we can control this infectious disease from escalating when it shouldn't. So, yeah.
Because it seems what they're saying, Anna, the gist I get from the opposition, and I know you don't necessarily want to talk politics, but just to talk about what they would plan, would they be government today, is to have no isolation. So it's not even the test negative to exit. It seems that the opposition is saying no isolation. Am I right in saying that the researchers, the medical experts, that COVID experts the world over are saying, in New Zealand the world over, thank the good Lord that the 7-day isolation have been kept in? Is there any pushback from that from within your community at all?
No, I mean, it's just sort of outright obvious way to go, because we have to remember that in this new environment we're in, we've lost all other protections. So anyone who is vulnerable is exposed already from people that don't care. So those people who are always going to be at risk will be at an extreme risk if there's no isolation. And so, world over, like as in the world, all different countries are doing different things. Yeah. But so too are their death rates and their hospitalizations and all the rest of it. So that's kind of what we balance up, right? And we also have to balance the fact that we're heading into our winter. I think one of the things that is worth noting is that our numbers, we did well through our summer period. Like we did, but we also know from history of every country that's gone through their summer and then into the winter, everything escalates at that point, because it's not just COVID, it's your flus, it's all the other winter illnesses that compound everything. So everyone's coughing and spluttering, and then all those hospitalizations start to go up for compounding reasons. So if there's ever a time to sort of keep some form of protection in place, it's heading into the most vulnerable time. And I think that's, they do say they're going to review this decision in a few weeks. I think we'll start to see it going up. I mean, in every circle, we're hearing someone on their, on a reinfection or the first time infectees, that's still happening. And we absolutely know, access to testing is rubbish, that the willingness to test is rubbish, reporting, all of those things are going to be minimizing our true numbers out there. So, keeping something in place, even if it's to sort of protect, to have some form of protection for the vulnerable is so important.
Do we have any idea? They were calling them novids at one stage, people who hadn't caught COVID. Do we have any idea what the percentage of the population are still novids?
It's a great question that we were campaigning for our ministry to answer. And the can is kicked down the road over and over and over. I think it's getting kicked to never. So, just wait for that announcement. But essentially, that it's a great question, because this is what every country has tried to do, to get an indicator of how many people have got some form of immunity and so on and so forth, because it gives us a baseline. It also gives us a baseline if we did the best job in the world. So it really breaks me that we're not seeking to prove that we've got widespread hybrid immunity that's keeping our numbers lower than other nations, but we'll never know, because we have not done a seroprevalence to get an idea of how many New Zealanders have any form of immunity, and that's how you sort of do that indication essentially. But I mean, I think we're probably more likely to hear about people who have managed to dodge it and then they get a big kick from getting infected, because what really seems to be holding, and the data is showing this too, is that hybrid immunity is pretty damn strong. Or, like as in at the moment. I say at the moment, you never hold your breath about, what variant may evolve, but hybrid immunity is giving good protection at a population level. But we will always hear about that person that suddenly succumbed, or the person who's on their multiple infections because they're just always getting, they're always susceptible. So that's sort of the situation I think we're facing. It is a bit of a mix there, because even when we've got lots of hybrid immunity, we'll be protecting the novids to a certain degree.
We've got a bunch of nerds in the chat right now. Swatty, geeky nerds. Threads, I've never had COVID. And Mr. Anderson, I'm a co-virgin.
Oh, that's a new
Jesus, that's worse.
David says, I'm a
confused.
novid. Vicky says, me too. Look at all these people, nerds. These guys will get beaten up at school, I bet you. DIY Guru, I'm a no COVID, no cry. So there's actually quite. I mean, if you're using our popular, I think it's just that we've got smart people watching. I think that's what it is, rather than maybe representative of the population.
I know heaps too. In fact, I did a head count of my family, and there's more novids than there is COVIDs. And I was like, oh, apart from the little ones, there's no escaping it once it sort of sweeps through children. But I was like, oh, this is, as a wider family unit, we're probably quite unique that we're polarized in the novid versus COVID. And, I tend to wander around with, devices that bleed people and all the rest of it. So I tend to kind of make them prove it. And so, when we do have a look for antibodies and, check the novid, because novids are interesting. Yeah. Some turn up to be suspicious, as in they weren't novids at all. They were asymptomatic at some point. And that's why it's really, really important that we should have done seroprevalence of the country, because even the novids, it can give that extra layer of comfort by going, woohoo, I nailed it and didn't feel it. Plus also, they know that they've got some form of hybrid immunity as well. So, it's just disappointing that, we haven't had a national survey to sort of gauge those numbers.
Can I ask you to explain, just in like 30 seconds or less, just so we update ourselves again, the idea of hybrid immunity? Can you just explain that super quick so people are really clear?
Yeah. So this is vaccination critical. And in fact, the data is showing, I believe, that vaccination first is your best protection, which is what as a population we did. So when you are exposed, you then get your immune system is then getting further training, and it's seeing the real McCoy. So it's not just seeing the spike protein, which is what our vaccination trains our immune system to detect. It's getting a much broader spectrum immune response, and those combined give you a much longer, basically longer duration and broader spectrum immune response. And I guess the key context here is that, we've had spin-offs of Omicron now for a year. And in that time, yes, they're all spin-offs, but that hybrid immunity is seeming to hold up. So the other key things about the immune system is we get obsessed about the antibody protection because that's what we can detect easily, and we call that waning immunity and all the rest of it. But underneath we have our more complicated adaptive, our T cells and things that also kick in and do stuff. And then another part of the immune system, which is a bit more non-specific, and that's like a sprinkler system. And we can't measure who's got a good one and who's got a bad one. So there's so many players, which is why, we're forever studying this stuff, that make the immune response different in everyone. But certainly the papers showing the hybrid immunity versus just vaccination is very, very compelling. And I must preface that with a hybrid immunity is never a goal, because it's best to never get infected, and keeping up with your vaccinations will help you not get infected. It's just that when you have been infected, your hybrid immunity is pretty good, at least in the current context, for a period of time, an unknown period of time.
Is everything in the country still Omicron? Like, I look at the charts just the other day and there's all the different acronyms and letters and Omicrons and not Deltas, but are they all Omicrons?
Well, they'll only become non-Omicron if we're sequencing and seeing that there's something different and decide to give it a new name, right? So,
but by Omicron, I kind of think that's the mother virus, and then had the babies. They're all kind of related, which means. So, for example, I was wondering. I had COVID in December. My 14-year-old got COVID on Friday. Well, we think she had it before that because she's basically over it already. And I was in her room with her an hour, giving her a cuddle before she went back to her mum's, breathing her air. And then she texted me when I was out saying, I've just tested positive. She had no symptoms. So I would have been inhaling her COVID air in her room an hour before. And I'll still say still, because Chewy challenged me last night, goes, not yet. But I still haven't tested positive. And I wonder if part of it's that hybrid immunity you're talking about. But the idea that because it's probably still an Omicron, that makes it even more protected. It's part of the same. I think about plants, you have the mother plant, and then you can take cuttings from it and have baby plants. It's that sort of thing. It's the versions of that mother one.
Yeah. And our immune system is now like more broadly trained. And so we always knew that vaccination and boosting was always good. So essentially, when you got COVID in December, your immune system was boosted. And we know that even a vaccine boost is good for a good 3 months at least. But when you get a viral boost, that's looking like it extends the duration. But as I say, you always take that with a grain of salt, because I could say, oh, look, it extends it for a year based on the paper I looked at that was based on a year ago. You know what I mean? So everything's always constantly moving. But but the point is that our hybrid immunity does last that much longer. And that's why we didn't see, when we were watching really closely over summer, when XBB 1 all the different variants that were causing massive peaks in the US, hospitalizations everywhere, we expected the same here. And the reason that we probably didn't see that was because we'd just been through our waves and high vaccination rates. And our population, I think, should be one to study, where we had mostly vaccinated before we're getting mostly infected. Right. There's very few nations that are in that order, and maybe that was the key. And, the politicians, it's bizarre that no one wants to prove this, because it could prove that the lockdowns were the best thing to do. There's so many things you could do with that information, because I don't think it's going to there's nothing negative that's going to come of it. I think we're in a position that we could show that sequence of events is best for our population-based health. But only time will tell. Because we're at a point in time and we don't know. It depends what we do from here, and whether how many more exposures and if this thing mutates any further, or whether we just got Omicron soups now.
I've only got one more question. Chewy, do you want to jump in with anything as well, Bill?
I guess talking about the comparison with other countries, right? This is the thing that always comes back. It just makes me want to bang my head against the desk. Luxon and Seymour also sort of went, but other countries, like, why are we comparing ourselves to people who had worse responses?
I know that's a funny one, isn't it? But they killed way more people. Let's do that. That's what it sounds like, right? So
but you're exactly right. Like, our circumstances are not the same as any other country out there.
Yep.
By all accounts, we made mostly right choices all the way through, and there's got to be a benefit at really examining the nuts and bolts of what that has given us now.
Yeah. Exactly, because it's honestly surprised me on a population basis that as those variants, the immune escape variants, because we see what that means in scientific literature in a laboratory setting, and then you see what happens in the real world. And what we were seeing in the real world in the UK and the US was peaks of hospitalizations, and we didn't see that happen here. We've been seeing bubbling away little, we haven't peaked with the new variants coming through. So I think that one of those escapees is, our main variant now. And yes, it will still be infecting people, but we're not getting a massive peak, because when that variant is circulating in a group of people who have had COVID, even if there's a bunch of novids as well, it's just that the percents getting infected are much lower. Like, you're not going to see 100% hit rate, I guess, is what we're what I'm sort of inferring here. You will get the odd person picked off. So yeah, it is frustrating to compare to other countries when we're not other countries. Yeah. And I think the thing that we can't lose sight of is the catastrophic events that happen in the hospital, basically in the winters of other countries. So we're mindful of that. Again, we don't sort of mirror that could happen here, but you've got to be careful of those scenarios, because it's our hospital, it's our healthcare workers that bear it, right? With your RSVs, your flus, and basically just anything else that's, people are getting exposed to now, because, it's a winter where all the floodgates are open. Yeah.
I still only had one more question. I kind of have two. The first one's, where's the cat? But the second one, and more importantly, is, are we in a bit of a surge at the moment? Because I know definitely 5 people right now who have COVID. Like, I know 5 people, like, not like friends of friends, but like a person directly related to me. I think I might know 6, potentially 7. It feels to me, from my little anecdotal evidence, that there's that it's starting up again. Do you see that at all in the data? The cat heard me. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. He's coming. He's incoming.
Oh, good.
Well, we'll see. It does seem a bit like that. And is it that we're heading into the cooler months, and it's always going to be a combination of waning and the winter. Because you're right. Like, I've started to hear more and more cases. The workplaces, and people are like, oh, so and so's finally got it, or they've got it. A couple of people on their second round. So yeah, it's sounding like it's starting to happen. And it's, as I say, it's tough to know if that's a combination of waning immunity and the winter months coming. Don't know. Now's a good time if you think you're bulletproof to get boosted. If you're a novid, 100% get boosted. Like, novids are sitting ducks, because that bivalent is giving you that broader spectrum immunity against the Omicron variants. And again, anecdotally, when we were here in the middle of the waves last year, we had the giant first one, and then during that second winter one, when it was sort of picking off people who had not had COVID back then, anecdotally, in groups of people who had COVID versus recently boosted versus sitting ducks, the recently boosted did not get infected. That the 3 times vaccinated sitting ducks got infected, and the others didn't get reinfected. So those are the sorts of scenarios that could potentially start playing out as well. That if you're a novid and you've just had your boosters, but your last one was a year ago, get boosted. Whereas you also may, in the same vein, sort of think, well, my infection was in December, like yourself. Will you push out your time period to 6 months because you've got a good innings right now that we can't measure? We don't know how long that lasts, but it's that how long is boosters are going to be accessible, and when's the peak time that you want to protect yourself, I guess is.
I think also the rules at the moment, it has to be 6 months after a booster or having COVID. So maybe what I'll do is get online and go and have a look, because I was the start of December. Maybe I'll go have a look for the start of, what would that be? December, January, February, March, April, May would be 5, June would be 6. So maybe I'll go and try and book myself in for the second week of June or something, and just book it now so I get a spot and see if I can make it happen. Maybe.
Yeah. So it's good to lock that in once you're different, and especially winter. We know it escalates. So yeah.
All right. Hey, look, it's amazing to have you on again. For people who don't know, who may be joining us for a first or second time, Anna has been sort of a co-host on this from time to time because she's always on, and she's on a lot and on for a long time. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really keen to obviously stay in touch with us. We know it's still out there. As the Prime Minister said, it seems like some people are treating it like it's not. But we just want to give people the information. You can lead a horse to water, Anna. You can't make them drink, but if we give them the information, that's all I guess that we can do from this side.
That's right. And it's all about caring for everyone as well, the vulnerable communities. And that's what this is all about. It's giving people the tools, as much tools as possible. And now we've got barely any. So, you know, having some tools will at least protect the remaining few that need protecting.
Yeah, very good. Hey, Anna Brooks, Dr. Anna Brooks from Auckland University. Thanks for joining us, mate. Really appreciate your time. Always do.
No problem.
Thanks, Anna.
Bunch of messages obviously have been coming in. A few of them that I starred. Let's have a look what's been in there. David says all anti-vaxxers are divorced from reality that beyond the ostrich with their head in the sand, they have their heads shut so far in their backsides they can lick their own tonsils. JK says of me saying that thing. Double the infection rate per population of the South Island and in the North Island, so people in Dunedin are more likely to know someone infected. So we've got it more down here, I guess, maybe. At the moment. I wonder if that's due to the weather. We're inside more. Politician, says Gareth, are avoiding COVID discussions like the plague. Sorry, couldn't resist. Let me say as well, when my 14-year-old got it on Friday, because I live in a house with potentially up to 6 people, depending if the kids are here or not, and it's quite, the thing for me is it's such an inconvenience, like to have to isolate a person in a room while the rest of the house still functions. So I kind of bit the bullet and I went and got a air purifier. Chewy, have I told you this?
Oh, yep.
I went and got an air purifier, quite a big grunty one that does 80 square meters, yeah? And I'm part of a study at the moment looking at CO2 levels in houses. So I've got a thing called a tether in my hallway, and it measures the amount of CO2 in your hallway, which is directly relatable to, in parts per million, to the viruses that potentially could be in the air. Now, how they say that you are safer is you are either outside or you make your inside like outside. And that's basically outside is 300 parts per million of CO2. And if it gets above 800 parts per million inside, that's getting time where all the doors and shit need to be opened up. And what happens with this thing, this tether in my house, is it goes like a graph. It goes up, and like overnight it goes up quite high to maybe 600-700, and then it comes down when people get up in the morning and go to school and open doors. Then it goes up and it comes down and it goes up and it comes down and it goes up like this. So it's like it goes up and down and up and down and up and down, like a heartbeat. Doo-doot, doo-doot, doo-doot. And since I've had the air purifier, so the tether is not connected to it, right? The tether is something completely separate. It's basically been a flat line the whole time. And it's real graphic evidence, well, not graphic, but real clear evidence that those air purifiers do exactly what they says on the label, and they purify your air, and they reduce the parts per million of anything in the air, including viruses. We had the chimney swept today, and the purifier went red. It's got these 3 light colors. It went red because a bunch of ash came out of the thing, and within about 15 minutes it had gone back to being blue. It had cleaned the air, and not that was a problem to us, but it was good to actually see it, how it worked, to go, it's detected impurities in the air and it was cleaning them out. So look, it's a luxury, I know. I kind of dipped into my savings to be able to do it because they're not cheap, but I'm going to probably have it on most of winter whilst we can't have doors and windows open here in Dunedin, shall we?
So someone I followed on Twitter had built a portable measuring device out of a Raspberry Pi.
Nice.
I think and that was really interesting. And to be honest, it's the major reason why I still mask up in public transport and have never stopped, because some of the worst readings that he got was out of a rush hour bus.
Yeah.
So yeah, just something to be wary of, and certainly when you look at it and you go, oh, CO2 counts high, that means the air I'm breathing has been breathed by so many other people. It's a bit gross. David mentions in the chat a Corsi Rosenthal box. That is something they've seen. It's a DIY air purifier you can build. Cool. That is well worth a Google if you're not wanting to get your wallet out quite so much as getting a bespoke Samsung air purifier.
Breville,
from
actually.
Oh, you got a Breville one.
Got a Breville one.
I haven't seen the Breville one. I know the Samsung ones because they're bespoke. Apparently,
look, I'm not.
That means.
I know it's a luxury, and it's actually, to be honest, it's probably a luxury I can't really afford. But I just thought, if this is going to be winter, I had a kid in the house with COVID at the moment, at that very point, and I wanted to protect other people in the house. We've got boarders who live here as well. Because the thing is, right, and this is like the work story, Chewy, and we are running super late, which is fine. You can tell your story if you want. But the thing is, if my 14-year-old gave it to a boarder, then one of the boarders has to isolate for a week, and if that boarder gave it to another boarder, then so it could eat up a month of my time, because it's a real hassle. And for me, I find it quite stressful having to think out, right, how do I get the kid to the bathroom? How do we do this? When's food coming? It actually fills my head with so much stuff. And then I thought, I just want to nip it in the bud. So we did what we could to make it as less likely for it to be passed around. And those air purifiers are freaking amazing, without question.
Yeah.
And like, speaking of passing it around, we haven't told them yet, Joey. Do you want to tell your story about?
Oh, okay. So yeah, we've hinted at this with Luxon talking about you've got to trust people to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So we had a customer come into work. I had an interaction with one of my colleagues for about 20 minutes, half an hour, and then left. And then, like, literally that same day, he's going, "Oh, I've got a bit of a scratchy throat. I better do a rat test when I get home." He was out the next day, completely screwed us up at work. And then that same person came back a couple of days later, and in a conversation with another one of my colleagues, casually mentioned that she'd come in on day 3 of her isolation. Her first visit was on day 3 of her isolation, and my colleague let her have it. Like, the guy that got it is actually he survived cancer, and that sort of thing, and that hit him like a bus. And that person, like, we had 2 more staff members go down that week with COVID and have to isolate, which completely screwed the rest of us up for the week.
Yeah.
And it came down to one person, knowing that they had to isolate, decided, no, I'll go into town and I won't wear a mask, or I won't wear it properly, and it's just a big joke. So yeah, we were all furious with that person. But yeah, and that's at a time where we have a mandatory isolation and people know that it's mandatory. Luxon wants to take that away. Seymour wants to take that away, because all they care about is business.
So what would happen, right, is people who work in retail would then have to be either basically guaranteed that they're all going to get COVID, or what you do is you'd be forcing the service industry into masks. So for people being selfish, not wanting to isolate, that would cause everyone in retail, unless they wanted to get COVID again and again and again and again and again, into masks. And you know, the idea of that is really disgusting. I want to say something as well to John. I don't know if John's taking the piss or not, but John says, I've got a beard too. Too bad it compromises the masks. It doesn't compromise the right mask. I'll show you what I use. I can't actually find the exact one, but if you look for a P1 mask, P1 masks are quite big and round. I've still got some upstairs, some P1 masks. You can get them either with valves or without valves. And yes, I know that if you get them with a valve, it doesn't protect the other person, but we are in a climate right now where people need to look after themselves quite a lot as well. So if you get a P1 mask, see, they're these much bigger. There's a P1 with no valve. They're much bigger, and they sit right under your chin, and they sit right on the side. And if you're someone with a beard, that's what you want to get. Now, it's not an N95, but it's basically one off it. So it talks about how many particles, 95. This is like 97 or something like that can get through. So if you've got a beard, like me, if you've got a decent sized beard, P1 masks. And the
advice that has always stuck with me is anything is better than nothing.
Wow.
And this goes back to cloth masks and all of that sort of stuff. You know, when the N95s were hard to get hold of and that sort of thing, these are the ones that I use. And they seem to do a decent job. But yeah, having beard makes it harder, no doubt.
Yeah, there you go. Look, I think there's a P2. There's a P1 and a P2. I'm just Googling it because this is what we do. This is just really a retail show that we're trying to help people out. P1s, P2s, see, they're much bigger. They're much rounded, and they're quite firm. I actually normally have one, not that I'm using them at the moment, but there's normally one just sitting in my studio, and I can't actually see one. I'll just show you.
I saw my boss ordering some more because we just have some in the shop just cause. And the website that he was getting them from had the full face ones. Oh, cool. And I was like, please get us full face. I want to look like we're in a chemical weapons zone. And apparently, no, a box of 200 cheap masks will be fine. We're not all getting $250 masks.
Now, you might have to put on a mask for protection right now.
This guy.
All right, we're going to play this for you. For people, I noticed someone in the chat saying, what did Sean Plunket have to apologise for? Go and follow me on Twitter and have a look there. Long story short, he spent 7, 8, it was more than that. It was like 11 or 12 minutes going on and 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 on, gleefully and absolutely patronisingly and smugly about how Jacinda Ardern is moving into the ability to actually, go and earn money and earn heaps of money, millions of dollars a week she could be earning, he said. And then it was proven all to be a hoax and he had reported it. So this is his apology. Now, he apologises, but the reason in my title I've called it, and maybe it's more of an apology, is in this apology, they don't play the audio that they did for the next 2 minutes afterwards of him being all snidey. It made me feel a bit like his apology was more like an apology. So let's have a listen to, I don't know if it'll be all of the apology, but let's have a listen to it.
Well, I need to start today by saying sorry. Sorry, guys. And that's me, Sean Plunket, the founding editor of the platform, got it wrong yesterday. We got it wrong I got it wrong. No one else was involved in the production and research of this story. It was my decision and my decision alone. To run with the fact that we believed, due to an online site that seemed totally kosher.
I'm not going to pick too much in about it. Even we believed. How many journalists say we? Have you ever heard David Farrier going, I was guessing that? Or, you know what I mean? It's like, we believed. I mean, maybe I'm being pedantic over language, but even that.
That Jacinda Ardern had taken a position or made herself available for a celebrity speaking or a speakers organisation in the United States.
And again, if that was true, where's the expose? You mean like John Key does paid speeches all over the world? What this is the other thing about this. Even if it was true, which it's not, what's the expose here? What's the smoking gun?
Potentially paying her hundreds of thousands of dollars a gig.
That's the smoking gun.
Well, it turns out, my thanks to my friends at the Spin-Off for pointing this out. It turns out that site is bogus.
Now that sounds almost honest, Thanks, guys, you picked it out. The snidey comments afterwards might paint that in a slightly different picture. Thanks to my friends at Spin-Off.
And Jacinda Ardern was good enough to ring them. It would seem, or for them to ring Jacinda Ardern, and I guess that's the access you get when you've had $7 million worth of taxpayers' money, to correct me. You could have rung me, Jacinda, but I accept that I was wrong. So that story...
He is a bit of a snowflake about this no access, eh?
Christ, isn't he, though?
Yeah, he is a bit of a... For being someone who's like, puts out there such the hard truth and stuff, he's pretty snowflakey about not getting access.
Was removed literally within 10 minutes of me finding this out.
Not before I downloaded it, though.
And I issued apologies online everywhere I could. Could I ask you if you've shared that story, if you've claimed it to be true, that you remove it, and you ask anyone you've shared it with to remove it and make it clear to them that the story is not true. I've done this without any threat of legal action or indeed anything but reading what the Spin-Off wrote, because I think that's the way journalists should roll. And
now, I'm happy to take him at his word at that. Like we questioned last night, was there some legalities in it? He says there's not. I'm happy to receive that as truthful. There's no reason to think it's not. Fine, we accept that. So last night when we asked the question, we'll say right now we'll issue an apology that asking the question was wrong, and we're not going to be snidey about it at all. Mind you, we didn't say it was legal. We just thought the question's been poked out there and he said it wasn't, so fine, we'll take that as truth.
If we get it wrong, we should say so and we should take our lumps. So mea culpa, my fault. And might I say, I look forward, given its level of access to the Prime Minister, to the Spin-Off, keeping us fully informed every time.
My friends at the Spin-Off.
And if possibly in future, former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern does indeed take a paid speaking engagement, I'm sure the Spin-Off will report that in full. So there you go. Apology. And the apology really is to you guys for getting it wrong. And I know that what we do requires honesty and trust and faith. And I let you down. So
there you go. So that was what he put out there. George has made a very good point. If you listen to Plunket, you become 92% dumber. Well, if that is the case, then what you should do is become a patron, and then you'd average that out at about 70, which wouldn't be necessarily quite so bad. Now, what I'm going to do, the reason I'm calling it a quote unquote apology, where's my cut wall? There it is not long after he finished that apology. Although you heard the snidey comments in the apology about, no access to the Prime Minister, and you heard the snidey comments in there about, I'm sure the spin-off will keep us informed, straight after he'd been saying, my friend's the spin-off. So this plays about the last sentence from what he said, and then he goes into talking about the next story. And again, snidey comments, to me makes it feel more like an apology. Maybe it's an apology in name, but certainly not in feeling.
And the apology really is to you guys
so this is
for getting it wrong. And I know that what we do requires honesty and trust and faith, and I let you down. So there we go. Moving on to another story we covered yesterday, which was bang on, and no one else was telling you, including the spin-off, was the fact that Radio New Zealand had produced
one
a story
snidey comment,
making a claim that police had proactively...
One snidey comment that it wasn't including,
contact them about
we got this and the spin-off didn't.
Online hate or any sort of threat against them. As Ben Espiner, who may be a better journalist than me at the moment, or certainly this week, as Ben Espiner found out from talking to the police, in fact, Radio New Zealand had totally misrepresented its conversation with the police. And without actually issuing an apology,
snidey comment
Ben,
number
tell
two.
us what happened yesterday with Radio New Zealand.
Well, you got to.
So snidey comment number two was, of course, saying, that they didn't issue an apology. RNZ hasn't issued an apology. Now, within 2 minutes, snidey comment number three.
I do note that a lot of the news organisations which reshared the Radio New Zealand story haven't changed the headline.
Oh, okay. So it was just RNZ. Well, I suppose it was their story.
That's all right. I'm sure the spin-off will put them right in time. Well done, Ben. That's a win.
So there you go. So now so you see what I'm saying? I mean, there's an apology in name. Technically, it's been done, but it certainly doesn't feel like an apology, in feeling, if you know what I'm saying.
I actually see someone from the spin-off has fired a reply back to Sean about this, actually.
Oh, okay.
Not that Sean has replied to it, but we approached Ardern's office. Ardern's office replied nothing about access. So that is kind of, would you say that that's just the basic building blocks of being a journalist?
That feels kind of what a journalist would do.
A bit journalisty.
Maybe
like
not
the vibe.
Not, of course, when he said, but I'm going to give it a guess. I'll give it a guess for how much he's earning at its non-existent job.
I've Googled a website, and the website says, and then I'm going to fill in the gaps.
So I actually, I recorded the apology this morning because I wanted to hear what was going to be said, and I'm not going to play any more of it. After about 7 minutes of it, I was done of listening to the platform, but I'll listen so you don't have to. If it causes me to get COVID or some other kind of botulism disease for listening to them, or to be 92% dumber, as someone said, so be it. But I do it so you don't have to. Right, we're going to keep trucking because we're talking from one lunatic right-wing, alt-right adjacent broadcaster to perhaps the queen of the world at the moment. So this is Liz Gunn, right? Liz Gunn has gone off the whatever you say, off the charts, off the reservation, off the whatever. She's completely gone into cuckoo land with what she thinks and what she believes. She's involved with, the baby that they wouldn't give vaccinated blood to, and it's just, off the, and I actually don't think Liz Gunn is a grifter. I think that she is fully on board.
She believes it,
and I think that she potentially has some issues to do with it. Now, in saying all of that, fucking Winston Peters gave her an hour and 40 minutes in a conversation. And all it says to me is the desperation of Winston Peters looking for any constituency that might put him back into Parliament. However, we've played this a couple of times, the themes around this conversation. The problem Mr. Winston Peters is going to face right through this election is from this alternative reality world where he's trying to get votes. They are all asking him the same question. Shall we get the question? This started on News Hub, and we've talked about it a couple of times. This is the question that Winston's getting, and now he's getting it from the alternative reality media, and this is going out to the alternative reality media's voters, which because of this question may not vote for Mr. Peters. Now, to Mr. Peters' credit, he did do a lot of pushback, but he pushes back with everybody. But just to be on this, it's like, think of the worst person in the world and give them 2 hours of your time to go and talk to the people who support the worst person in the world. But the question at the start is the thing that's going to haunt Winston with the alternative fact brigade.
There are 2 words that go in front of you, Winston, as much as I admire you, and I cannot escape this question. Jacinda Ardern. Voting to go with her. If you could say, I regret it and I'm sorry, and I can't put words in your mouth, people would honestly, I think, cheer.
How uncomfortable he is already.
Could you say, looking at what she's done to ruin our country, betray us, hurt us, and then bugger off with no results so far, no...
Speaking of this, she used to be quite a respected journalist. She's trying to elicit an answer out of him that she's feeding him. Have you got that? Could you
100%.
say?
It's a leading
could you
question.
say?
I regret it and I'm sorry. And I can't put words in your mouth.
Bloody trying.
People would honestly, I think, cheer at the end of this interview. Could you say it, looking at what she's done to ruin our country, betray us, hurt us, and then bugger off with no results so far, no repercussions for a woman who has done such damage to a country? Could you say in this?
Well, that's a long question, Liz. I'm going to cut it short right now. I know where you're trying to go.
I'm sorry.
But you need to know the circumstances of what I was dealing with. At the very first meeting,
and we've sort of heard this. If you haven't heard this, we've played this before.
2017,
He now
not
talks about why he
Billings,
signed on with
he says to
Labour.
me, Collins, this will go live. It's been 1,000 national to come onto the...
Do you regret going with Jacinda?
Well, you're not seeing what I'm trying to tell you. When Bill English said that to me, there could be a spill on. I shook Jim Bolger's hands many years before to form a government with him, even though he'd sacked me twice. I put aside my animosity and thought this country needs a government. And I shook hands with him, and he will tell you this himself, that there was being organised under him by a person not remotely competent called Shipley, a coup to get rid of Bolger. So I'm shaking hands with the wrong person. You get my point here?
For my part, I would say I had no option, I felt at the time.
She's
but
trying
I
to get her to say this
regret it.
again.
That's what I would say, and I deeply respect your right to have your perspective on that.
So, 2 things here. The first is Liz Gunn trying to get people in her interview to say what she wants them to say. The second is, what do you think, Joey? Winston Peters giving her 2 hours of his time in person to do an interview to pitch to the people who support Liz Gunn. Winston wants their vote. Winston wants Liz Gunn supporters' votes. Yeah.
Anything he can get. Winston is famously incredibly prickly in any interview. I've never seen him dedicate that much time to an in-person, face-to-face interview like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, I've never seen it. Like, he just doesn't do it. So for him to give that much time to someone who most people would say is a crank,
yeah,
and to sit there and take, like, as you said, Liz Gunn used to be an accomplished media person. She used to do interviews.
Yeah.
What was it, 1.5 minutes as a question? Like, it's just insane. I'm surprised he didn't walk out. But yes, it reeks of desperation. It reeks of, I've seen the poll numbers and most of my supporters are dead. I need to get some new ones.
Or my supporters are dead, or they don't like Jacinda, or they're all confused about 3 waters and the mandates. And those are the people who are listening to people like Liz Gunn, Sean Plunket, maybe Counterspin. So is he going to go on Counterspin?
Yeah.
Is he going to go on Chantal Baker's show?
New Zealand First has traditionally positioned itself as dead centre. That's what they want to be. They want to be the balance of power.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll have some quite progressive social policy. Sometimes they'll be like, let's chuck all the immigrants out. But ultimately they try to position themselves as dead centre. By talking to Liz Gunn and her audience, that is not centrist position. That is fringe. Either side, they're looking at a fringe audience. And yeah, I need every number I can to get across the line to get back into Parliament.
Yeah. All right. Anything in the chat you want to put up there before we move on to our last little story about Easter trading?
No, let's crack on about Easter trading, because I have opinions.
Okay, so here's the conversation with Christopher Hipkins again. This was a story that went out yesterday, but we had other things to focus on to do with Easter trading. He's getting asked the question about Easter trading and what he thinks about the situation. This is after a weekend article came out where Christopher Luxon said that they would do a review. The Labour Party workplace minister said, get the fuck out of here, we're not doing that. And this was the part of the interview we pick up on.
I see that your workplace relations minister has said that Luxon's call to review these laws is pathetic. Do you share his view on that?
When this last came up, I voted against allowing wholesale trading on Easter, on Good Friday and Easter Sunday. There are only sort of 3.5 days of the year where shops are restricted from trading, and I don't think that that's necessarily an undue burden on businesses. It does guarantee that most New Zealanders for a couple of days of the year are going to have an opportunity to spend some time with their families. It's normally the subject of a conscience vote when it comes up in Parliament. That's always been the case for the National Party. They have some relatively staunch, conservative Christians who typically have voted against allowing trading over the Easter break. It's ultimately a matter for them. But I don't think it's an undue impost on business.
Okay, so no review under a Labour government.
No, certainly not something that we're proposing.
Okay.
So that was Labour's position pretty clear, and let's have a look at National's position on the Easter trading laws.
The Easter show has returned to Auckland after a 3-year hiatus.
Ever been to the Easter show, Chewy?
No.
Oh man, Green Lane, it's the best fun. It's a proper carnival. It's amazing. Anyway.
And National's leader was there hoping he's come up with his own showstopper. Christopher Luxon is vowing to review our controversial Easter trading laws if elected in 6 months' time. Zane Small caught up with him.
Christopher Luxon making an entrance and making acquaintances at Auckland's Easter show.
It's amazing, eh? It's like the memories that you had as kids.
There were plenty of selfies and greetings from one bald man to another.
You are one good-looking man.
And with the election spinning ever closer, Luxon made an Easter promise to review the holiday's trading laws.
Something we're definitely up for review.
Trading is restricted on Good Friday and Easter Sunday, and the rules depend on where you are in New Zealand because some councils have passed their own bylaws. But even if a business can open at Easter, overarching laws still apply. For example, alcohol can only be sold if the customer is having a meal. Last year, the Labour Inspectorate received 17 complaints, of which 2 businesses were prosecuted. The government's argument is that Good Friday and Easter Sunday are just 2 out of 3.5 days of the year when trading is restricted and workers get time to spend with their family and friends. And the Workplace Relations Minister Michael Wood has told me that safeguarding that is important. But the rules don't sit well with hospitality venues like North Park on Auckland's Wynyard Quarter.
Sales go down because you can't be serving alcohol without the meal, and sometimes it even angers the customers.
Some support the rules.
I think they're great laws. I think we should keep them as they are, and makes for a great weekend.
But tourists we spoke to found it confusing.
I think it's nice to have a day off as a worker, but I think as a tourist especially, we weren't prepared for it.
ACT proposed a law last year that would have given businesses the choice to trade at Easter.
It's just one less hassle that small business owners and their customers have to think about.
The Workplace Relations Minister says ACT didn't get the balance right and instead put business profits ahead of workers' rights, which is why it wasn't supported.
Shocking.
But if it's the in charge come October, those Easter trading rules could very soon be spun around. Zane Small.
So, Chewy, you had some views. You go for it, my friend.
Yes. So when I heard that there was a review of the Easter trading laws, I was like, yes, there is something that they could do. But they won't. That's very clear. Easter Sunday is a weird one because when they drew up the initial laws, no business was open on Easter Sunday. So there was no need to make it a statutory holiday.
Yep.
So if you can't go to work, if you want to get paid, you have to use a holiday. You have to use some of your leave. Yes. And it's the only holiday that does it. If they wanted to make that fair, they'd just make it a stat day so people could get paid. You know, some businesses will pay it out because, you know, it's not the worker's choice that they can't go into work. But that's something that could be updated and should be a slam dunk win across it just makes it make more sense. I don't give a damn about the religious aspects of the holiday, but it is one of the few holidays where a retail worker or a hospitality worker shares the holidays with other workers. And that's always they're always the guys that are under the gun when then they go, oh, well, you know, people want to go to the shops on a holiday. Cool. Well, if people want to go to the shops on a holiday, someone's got to work it. So it's not a holiday for everybody. You know, and then
it was interesting. It was interesting watching those. Those tourists, or the lady who went, oh, you know, it's really good to have workers getting a day off, but what about me? I want a beer. That's basically what she said.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you travel anywhere, you are apart from the US where nobody ever takes any leave off ever. You know, I went traveling through Turkey during Ramadan, and some things weren't open. Wow. And I didn't run to a newspaper.
How inconvenient, Chewy.
Yes, absolutely. It's just part of the country that you're in. Sometimes the rules are not what you're used to. It's not about you. You'll be gone soon. But yeah, it's like when ACT has suggested reviewing public holidays and that sort of thing, and they just go for a very individual approach of like, okay, well, say the workers they get 5 days off a year and you can just take them whenever you want. It doesn't solve the problem of everybody is off at the same time. You can catch up with your friends and family.
Yeah.
And here's we have Easter and we have Christmas, and that's it.
We talked about Elon Musk putting those labels on Twitter on government-funded media outlets, and I was like, I support this as long as every other media agency declares where they get their funding from and their alleged conflicts of interest. So what petroleum companies are bankrolling places like Fox News, that should be on their bio as well. I kind of feel the same about this. All right, I'll support you, Luxon and Seymour, on this as long as you stand up and say, Anzac Day, everything should be open from 9 a.m. Cenotaph, no, we're going to be doing that. Christmas Day, it should be the same. Because actually, if you're going to bitch and moan about Easter and Easter Friday and Easter Sunday, then why not Christmas? I mean, because actually they're Anzac Day is that half day, but those 3 days are very similar to each other in the way they feel and how people function in them. Yeah,
so it's like if you, on Anzac Day,
if you want to go and do this to Easter, and I think about the workers, and we've already talked about this tonight with COVID, is that we all know what it's like. You're a young person, you're working at a petrol station, whatever, it's an entry-level job, and your boss kind of goes, oh yeah, we really want you to work on Friday. Good Friday. Yeah, but we need you. But it's Good Friday. Yeah, but listen, I need you. You know, and the world over, you've all heard stories about then the review comes up and the person loses their job or their life is made more difficult because they haven't bowed to the pressure of the work. This is a little bit like the mandate. It is basically a mandated day off. The business owner can't do anything about it. The worker gets put priority. 3.5 days of the year, the worker can claim a priority over the other 362.5. Is it the right number? 61.5. And I think there's nothing wrong with it. People are saying, oh, we don't earn enough money on that day. Well, don't fucking open. You know, do you complain about that on Christmas Day? Oh, look, it's really annoying because we don't earn enough on Christmas Day. It's like, well, you're not open. You know, it's just, it's inconsistent at what it is. The other thing I'm fascinated about is we all know about Christopher Luxon's deeply held religious beliefs. He is putting business ahead of his deeply held religious beliefs and families and workers, which I guess is where you would expect National to sit, Chewy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and you got Seymour talking about, it's another cost to small businesses. If you can't plan for public holidays when you're doing your sums on how you run your business, then why are you in business? Get the calculator out. You know, it is a cost of doing business. It is like the cost of you buying stock. It is like your rent. It is like the bedrock. Payroll is the bedrock of your business. Learn how it works. Adjust your prices accordingly. That's how it works.
Yeah.
It's just basic stuff.
Carl makes a really good point about Sean Plunket. You know, because even and I didn't pick up on this as clearly as I think Carl has, if I'm interpreting this the right way.
He's nailed it.
Is that Plunket once again in his apology didn't do his journalistic due diligence by saying the spin-off called Jacinda or Jacinda phoned the spin-off. A journalist would phone the spin-off and go, how did you get that information? You know, that's what a journalist would do rather than just casting aspersions. I'm assuming that's what Carl's meaning by when he says all that he could have called and verified the information he got, you know, like a real journalist, but he was so excited he bypassed journalistic integrity and failed on multiple fronts. Talking about Liz Gunn, she is seriously obsessed with Jacinda, slightly posh, completely unhinged. She's knucking futs. And talking about Winston Peters, he's desperate for relevance. That makes one do pretty desperate things. Roas, interesting question. Is David Seymour to the left of Winston now? Talking about New Zealand First, they've always positioned themselves as populist, which is interesting, actually, John, because it is fairly popular amongst a very, very, very small percent of people at the moment to run that anti-mandate, which is over, but to still be in that world, the alternative media world. And he's pitching for them. So yeah, it may not be populist. I think about populist as in mass, like mass market. It's not mass market, but if it's enough to help get him over the line, then yep. So there you go. JK says, Luxon, people should work on Easter so I can enjoy it. JN says Luxon is turning out to an all-round Grinch. And another one here from JK. Give businesses the choice, not give choice workers a choice. That's exactly what we're saying. Yeah.
I kind of made a side reference to Anzac Day. That's another one that I'd love to review. Why is it only a half day?
Well, I mean, but if they're going to get rid of Easter Friday and Easter Sunday, surely they have to get rid of Anzac Day too. That would be consistent. I mean, I know that for you personally, you're very passionate about Anzac Day, and I want to be respectful of it as well. But all I'm saying is, if they're going to get rid of Easter Sunday, Easter Friday, then they have to get rid of Anzac Day. There's no way around their consistency where they could say no to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, there's an argument to have a look at the Holidays Act and maybe look at some of the old outdated laws. I think some of them really do lurk in those older acts.
Yeah.
But that's not what they're looking at.
Yep. All right. Hey, thank you to our patrons. Good to have you on board. I was thinking about doing a meetup this weekend, but I probably left it a bit late, seeing tomorrow's Thursday. So probably the following weekend, we'll do an online meetup to patrons. If you want to be a part of that, then all you need to do is become a patron. And how you do that is by heading to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. We've lost a couple of patrons in the last couple of weeks, people heading off overseas and doing fun international things. Huge thanks to those people who have supported us so far. But it means if you want to come on board, it would be a great time to come on board. If you enjoy what we do, if you think what we do is valid, like is needed, then one of the ways you can help us, there's two ways you can help us. One is to become a patron, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And the other is just to tell people about us. Share our stuff around. Let people know what we're doing. We've actually had quite a big influx of people in the last couple of weeks finding us saying things like they're balanced and they're fair and they talk to all sorts of people. So if you're one of those people joining us from recent times, then tell your mates about us. Tell one person, Chewy. Everyone tell one person. And then we can do like that Weller ad. And she told two friends, and she told two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. And then very quickly, we might be able to find business mummy and daddy to give us $3 million as well. All right, I think we're done. Anything else you want to add, Chew, before we head off?
Only that I won't be here tomorrow night, maybe.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, I got a work thing.
Nice.
So you might have to stag it, but yeah, if I can get here, I will.
Yeah, cool. All right, dudes and dudettes, and anything else in between. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. We may have a guest, Bear. I said Bear, Big Hairy News. That's the wrong one. A guest beard with us, maybe. Whether they have a physical beard or not, we may not. But I will definitely see you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. So good to be with you. Thank the good technical lords that all my audio is working tonight. I didn't even talk about it. See that, Joey? Didn't even talk about it. It all just worked. It was a beautiful thing. And go if you can, unlike me, go hug your mum for some reason. Be nice. And see you over on Patreon at some stage. All right, team. Stay safe. Speak to you tomorrow night. Hooroo.
See you.